Hey. Hello, everybody. Good morning. How y'all doing? Or I should say, good afternoon. Let me take y'all out my ear doing this technical sport. Now, welcome to my first ever African history class. We're going to see if we can get to African spirituality class right after this because I believe that they should be side by side and one on one. Now, this is not something I advertised it during our Alkebulan inspirational Sunday services. I advertise it during which is on Sundays, of course, at noon. I advertise it on our the African Speaks, which is Tuesday at 7 p.m. And so I sat down and said I had promised myself because we're in the season of gratitude. I had promised to my ancestors, to the Creator, to myself that I will finally deliver the African online African history courses to my community and to the broader scope of things. So, one, I am letting you know I am not the expert. I am what we call in my community the Malekio, which is the seeker. I seek higher wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and I go, in reference to spirituality and reference to history. I'm seeking a sense of self realization, something to empower me, and so I share that information. I let you know that this was charged by. I'm doing this as a charge from my community. One brother named Walamu Olatunji, and some of you may remember or know Walamu Olatunji. I've had him on the African Speaks several times, right? And he had blessed me. I think he had given us African history class in our community maybe for like the last 25 years. And so he's got generations and generations and generations of individual experiencing the classes and the lessons. And so he was watching the development of the world of Akibaland, which is, our youth site, our youth program. And we teach all levels of education via World of Akibaland. And so he had blessed me with and charged me with the responsibility of taking what he has on paper and sharing it digitally. Now, of course, he's working on that as well for himself. But he has said, "Look, brother, I need you to get this to the kids and as many people as possible." He said, "You have the infrastructure; yours is already built." So he said, "The same way somebody blessed me with the information, he said, brother, I'm blessing you." And that was like just before the summer hit this year, and so it took me a minute, and so I said what he did was, and I discussed this before, he gave me something he calls the People's Library, the resource, the People's Library. And what it is, the People's Library, let me see if I can get it up to you. It is a hard drive of over 6 terabytes of African history. 6 terabytes. Yep, the People's Library, 6 terabytes of African history. You see right here, we have the Health Library, just instructions, music and culture. So going to music and culture, it's nothing. You got audio. What is that? Carnival, comedy, Kwanzaa, movies, music. So it's just a bunch of culture in there. And then here you have our history. In our history, you have African history worldwide, demographics, money and capitalism, how that developed, nature library, religion and biblical history, the evolution of man. And then you have the time, certain timelines. And we're going to work out of the evolution today of man. And we want to talk about before, and then I'll let you know that he gave me this information freely, and he gives this information away freely and charged me to give the information away freely as well. So if you have a hard drive and it has to be at least 6 or 7 terabytes, and you want the documentation here, as we go across the class, you'll see some of the things in the videos that are in this particular database. 6 terabytes of African history. That's a lot. And then he said he increased it by another 3. So he has actually 9 terabytes, and I'm going to be waiting to get that other set I'm a compile it with this one. I'm gonna get another hard drive and compile it, so I have all of it. But right now we're gonna be dealing with the beginning of African history, and I want to talk about using information as a resource. You can always tell the mindset of a people by how they use their resources. You can always tell the mindset of a people of how they use their resources. Is it wasteful, conservative? Do you share it? You know what I mean? Do you cultivate it, help it grow? Um, do you take it for granted? It'll always be there. And so, with that being said, some of this information comes off of the hard drive, and some of the information comes off the internet, right? And so I want you to be sure that we are in a place now before they sit down and canonize the internet, which means categorize it according to what you can see and what you couldn't see. And Trump tried it, but the only thing that stopped him from doing it was other white folks. White folks were like, wait a minute, this we're using the internet for economic stability and growth. So they wouldn't let them separate it because they said we are, all white people aren't rich, but some of them are becoming very wealthy behind learning how to use technology for their betterment and their development. And so that's important. So we want to make sure that we utilize it as well. So I tell you, YouTube University is the bomb, and then also being able to go through this is the internet is the new encyclopedia. I know in my age we had to have books and you had to look it up and turn. Here it's just text search. So any information that you need in reference to African history, uh, look it up because you have tons of us out here working on making sure that we get to our people more and more information. But I want to let you know again, I am not the expert. I am the Malakio. I was blessed with this information. I'm putting together. He gave me the curriculum, and he gave me the resources to study. Now, when I first opened the hard drive, man, it was just bombarding of information, and that's why it took me so long. How am I going to dissect this so that I can present the information as close as possible? And so we want to be able to do that. Now we know that the importance of understanding our history, maybe we don't. Well, the importance of our history and learning our history is it empowers us with a strong sense of self identity. It's a strong sense of self identity, who we are in this world, who we are in God, what did we actually contribute. And then that should add toward how we relate to one another. Now, when people are always saying black people don't work well together, it's because we're not functioning from the mindset of our culture, of our history. You feel me? And that's what we're functioning from the scars of colonialism, the mark of slavery. And that's what keeps us from coming together. Why? Because the world doesn't fear black man, the world fears a global Pan African black people. And so when you are receiving the right education, or you're giving our kids the right education. It's an education that helps them develop a strong sense of self and allows them to function in this global systematic oppression in which we live in. And it's not necessarily teaching them how to assimilate, because that's not what a true sense of self does. A true sense of self empowers you to work collectively to develop the institutions that governs our lives. We keep saying all black everything, but you cannot embrace the all black everything if you cannot embrace the blackness that lies within. So you sit down and say, I got a business, please support me. But then you sit down and you interact with those businesses, and none of those businesses actually support who we are as a people. And that's the scary part, in terms of how we've been colonialized in our minds. I just watched the presentation off of the hard drive, right off the hard drive, and I'm gonna see if I can play it later. We'll see if I can import it to play it later. In the hard drive, where it talks about the fact that Africans who were way beyond uh, uh, any other society when it came to medicine, healed from head to toe. Your illness came from your thinking and your perception and what you was receiving. And then if they could heal how you received information and how you utilized your resources, it would disseminate down to your body. Meaning, if your diet was the problem, I don't want you to just change your diet. I want you to change how you think about your diet and then begin to eat differently. We have a lot of individuals, and you see the gray and the wisdom coming. I have tons of friends now who are struggling with their parents to changing their diets because we now walking into, well, first we were young, now we're the seeking wisdom and we trying to get our parents to eat healthier. But you can't because they are still colonialized here in terms of the diet. And so we want to be able to embrace. We know that we are becoming into our right and righteous mind because we are able to work well with the resources we have in this oppressive society, and we are pulled spiritually, not only intellectually but spiritually pulled to work together to create a global pan-African experience to develop power for ourselves. Now that's just not happening here in the United States. Of course, I got the continent of Africa up. That's happening in Zimbabwe. That's happening in Ghana. It's Nigeria. There was another. Oh, it was another. Oh, where was the other place? It wasn't Senegal. Surname. It was happening in Surname, right? And I think that's up there in the corner somewhere. But we are, as a people around the globe, are moving toward connecting those relationships back, where we understand that we are one people. And for us in the states, we have to begin to embrace the decolonized process, which is receiving the information of who we are according to how we see it. In my community, we say that there is nothing more sacred than the liberation of black people. If it leans towards us being completely self determined, it is sacred. If it pushes away from us being self determined, it is useless. That's how you can tell in terms of information, and that's how hopefully this will go. Let's see here. And so, let me get started. I got my little points here. If we start now, to let y'all know, there's going to be, and again, I appreciate those who see, those who watch. If you happen to watch us on Facebook at any given time, yes, hit like, comment, share. I believe a lot of information should be free, and this is one of them. You shouldn't have to pay for a high level African history class. You just shouldn't, because why? Sacred. Now, should you donate? Absolutely. Right now, I'm only asking you to like, comment, and share. I'll be advertising it later, but we want to make sure that we do that. And if you're watching us on YouTube, The African Speaks, hit subscribe, hit the bell, make sure that this gets out, share it, create an algorithm for the liberation, which is deeply important. Create an algorithm for liberation. I see Renita. Hey, love. How you doing? You know, she said she would peek in on me. Ha 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 ha. Now, I also believe African spirituality and African history needs to be taught simultaneously. Right. African spirituality and African history needs to be taught simultaneously. Why? Because it is easier, it's even more better to understand the history. When you're understanding the history of a people, it is also important to understand the spirit in which the people were immersed in or governed by, that allowed them to create and do such great things in the world. That's the thing about African spirituality. So when you start embarking, it's not just a conversation, we did these things. We're going to go in depth. We're going to look at the different civilizations and communities and societies and all of what they contribute or we contributed, our ancestors contributed to this planet, and how we helped develop modern civilization. When you saying we're bringing mathematics to the world, it's no joke. And so everything around us is mathematics and science. So where did they get that from? The first people on the planet. And so that's important. So we want to be able to try to bring both those, because we want to see ourselves as we see ourselves in the eyes of the Creator, not in the eyes of those who colonized us. And there's going to be a lesson where we're going to break up and show how they broke Africa down, as and then there's one of those meetings in Belgium. I think it's 1844, if I was right. Not quite sure. Again, I am the Malakio, not the expert. So the brain is not going to be, but I'm going to write it down, I'm going to deliver it, and I'm going to present it. And so we want to make sure we get to that information where we see how they carved up Africa. We're going to discuss why they carved up Africa. What happened in reference to how were they able to take advantage of the wealth of information that we had. It was because of who we are spiritually. We didn't see violence like that. We didn't think anybody would destroy wisdom, understanding. Who does that? That which doesn't understand it. They take it, destroy what they can't, and use what they can for their own benefit. That wasn't in our minds to understand a being such as that. And that's why understanding African spirituality is deeply important, because we're going to need that as well as understanding our history to get to who we need to be and how we need to be as a people. Now, if we are to get started, oh man, there was a pitch. Wait. There's not a pitch. I said that there was a pitch I wanted to show, but I can do that. But if we are to get started, we're going to start. Wait, where is it at? Migration. Let me see if I could do this real quick. No. Pangea. We're looking for. So we're going to start with the concept of Pangea. Now, the concept of Pangea is that the world was all one mass. And so as we watch these images, we'll talk about the videos after. Again, most of this information you can find from the People's Library, created by Walamu Latunji, here at the Pan African Orthodox Christian Church, World of Alkebulan, one of the brothers, and we had him up here a couple of times. You can find it all here. So if you seek to have access to this data, this life's gathering of information, 30 years of information, and you have videos, papers, a whole bunch of stuff in here. I know for me, when my niece called one day and was crying because she was learning about the Moors, which means black. Moors mean black. She asked the teacher, she raised her hand and asked the teacher, and asked her where was African people when Moors were taking over Europe? She said Africans was enslaved. She said no, but I thought the Moors were African, or they were black. She's like, no, Moors are white. And so when she was learning, it's like, what you mean the Moors are white? We were Africans. And she said Africans were slaves. No, Moors are Africans. And so she told her no. And so she called me, and I went straight to the People's Library. I said, look, I want you to give your teacher this information and tell her this is where she needs to teach from. And the sister was like, the white lady was like, oh, that's not enough information. I said, oh, you really want the in-depth information? So I gave her articles, I gave her books, I gave her everything that she needed, and I sent it with a letter saying that you're miseducating my niece. And I will take the information that I have and I will bring it to your school and I will take it to the school board. I said, you're telling her lies. And this is not acceptable if you're educating a diverse group. If she asked you a question, you should have been able to answer it. I told my niece, I said, you got to be careful. I said, because it depends on what sect of Moors she's teaching on. So she's teaching at the origin of the Moors. That's one thing. But then when you talk about Africans or the Moors who were Africans, who were black, who came into Europe to take over Europe, and then they sat down and converted Europeans to be Moors. Now then they developed sects of Moors who were Caucasians. Now of course this is going to be another lesson way down the line, but that's the benefit of the People's Library. And so we're going to get started. We're going to watch these videos and we're going to discuss the concept of these videos. First up, Pangea.
20th century, the German scientist Alfred Wegener noticed that the eastern coast of South America and the western coast of Africa fit together nicely, almost like two pieces of a puzzle fitting together. Then Madagascar fit nicely around the side of Africa, while parts of India seemed to have a place as well. Despite heavy criticism, Wegener went on to publish the book The Origin of the Continents and Oceans in 1915, pushing the concept of what he called Urkontinent, meaning supercontinent in German, except in a 1920 edition of the book where, for a single time, he called the land the Pangaea of the Carboniferous, coining the term from the Greek pan, meaning the entire or all, and Gaia, meaning earth. Of course, it was the Latinization of this word that became the more common phrase now, Pangea. And today, Pangea and the larger theory of plate tectonics are more or less common knowledge. Beyond that, though, I don't know if I've ever actually seen a good prediction on what the continent actually looked like. Most maps you'll find are either too simplistic for my taste or just an artistic representation of Pangea, which can trade accuracy for aesthetic. So what I'd like to do today is make a rough estimate of what some of the geography of Pangea was like, and hopefully by the end we'll have a cool map or something. Obviously, this will just be an approximation based on what we know so far about the supercontinent. So with that in mind, let's get started. First, Pangea itself existed for around 160 million years, forming around 335 million years ago, and breaking apart roughly 175 million years ago. Over this time, Earth's geological engine was still turning underneath, meaning that on a geologic timescale, Pangea would have been constantly changing, and so one general map of Pangea can't really be made. Instead, we're going to need to pick a specific time in Pangea's past to look at. This one's going to be a bit arbitrary, but we're going to aim for between 190 million years to 230 million years ago. This was around the time of the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, during which 20 to 30% of all marine species went extinct. For this time, the most accurate map for Pangea I could find was this one. But using this, we can now begin to look at specific features, and to start, I'd like to look at some of the mountain ranges that would and would not have existed during this time. For starters, nearly every major mountain range on Earth today had not formed yet. The Himalayas, for example, only began to form 50 million years ago when India collided with Asia. And overall, it was the tearing apart of Pangea that actually gave us many of our mountains. And the reason these all happen to be our tallest is because they haven't had enough time to erode. So to find out what would have been around during this time, we need to look at some of the oldest mountains remaining on the Earth, such as the Appalachian Mountains of the United States, the Little Atlas Mountains of Morocco, and the Scottish Highlands of Great Britain, all of which are nearly 500 million years old. Now, it just so happens that these three mountain ranges would have formed a single continuous mountain range across the supercontinent called the Central Pangean Range. And while none of these ranges stand particularly high today, 4 different mountain building events in the past produced a mountain range that was once as tall as the Himalayas are now, essentially separating the continent between the two remnants of older supercontinents, Gondwana and Laurasia. It was only with several hundred million years of weathering and erosion that these once great mountains were whittled away to the gentle slopes of today. However, there were of course other mountain ranges here as well. Nearby, the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec reaching into Greenland, for example, were also created during the Grenville orogeny, making this area of Pangea, occupied now by Canada and the United States, some of the most mountainous land on the Earth at the time. Then there was the Guiana Shield, a series of mountains and highlands in South America with a history that extends back nearly 1.7 billion years.
Now, what I want y'all to see, every time he flashes the Pangean map, look where Africa sits. Africa sits in the center of the world. Okay? That's important. Mindful. Watch.
You can just barely make it out on modern elevation maps of the region. We also would have seen some of the earliest mountain building in the Andes with the start of the Andean orogeny. These would have been just the beginnings of mountains, however, and nothing like what they are now. Then, as the lower section of Pangaea, what was previously Gondwana, began to tear itself apart, splitting Africa from South America, mountains were created around the divide, resulting in the mountains of eastern Brazil and western Africa. South Africa is actually where many of the world's oldest mountain ranges are today, with the oldest being the Mkonjwa Mountains. Lastly, I want to talk about the Verskynarajane, which was another substantial mountain building event that led to the growth of the Alps and the Pyrenees in Europe and spread all the way out to the Ural Mountains of Russia and the Tian Shan Mountains of Central Asia, as well as many other mountain ranges sprawling all the way to the far coastal Primorye region, also in modern-day Russia. This places mountains roughly along these lines on our map of Pangaea, and with that, we finished making the important mountain ranges at the time. After mountains, next I'd actually like to talk about the ocean. First, there was the Panthalassa Ocean, the ocean which encompassed most of the world, with its name literally translating into the All-Sea in Greek. And then we'd get the beginnings of the Tethys Ocean, if considered separate from the Panthalassa Ocean. And this body of water would have been around 60 million square kilometers, a bit smaller than the Indian Ocean today, but still much larger than the Arctic Ocean. What I'm interested in, however, isn't the size of these oceans, but how the ocean during this time would have influenced the climate and ecology of the land. I don't think anyone will be surprised to hear that the ocean can affect climate in multiple different ways. In terms of rainfall, lands directly beside the ocean will typically experience greater amounts of it, while the continental interiors, the lands furthest from the ocean, will become increasingly arid. We can see a similar effect taking place across Central Asia today, where due to its remoteness, a band of dry regions can be found crossing nearly the entire body of Asia. But I wish it were that simple. The thing we really need to look at is ocean currents, or how the waters of the ocean would have circulated around the world during this time. Now, there isn't really great fossil evidence for what ocean currents would have been like, so there's nothing really tangible for us to go on. But we still know how the Earth was rotating, basically the same way it does now. And because of this, we know that the wind patterns across the Earth would be virtually the same as they are now, meaning they'd look like this. Now, it's the winds that push surface waters around, so knowing these winds, we can reconstruct a general schematic for water circulation, at least at the surface. First, by the equator, both winds from north and south push the water in a westerly direction, creating an ocean current moving to the west across equatorial waters. Because it's at the equator, these waters will also be warm water currents, which will be important later. This equatorial current would continue flowing westward from the Panthalassa Ocean, pushing warm water into the Tethys until it reached land. Where this happened, the waters would have been diverted around. In the northern hemisphere, this sends water upwards and eventually back out, cooling down in the process. In the south, well, a similar thing happens as the water deflects and cools down a little before getting sent back east. Tracing these water movements onto the other side of the continent, we'd still have that westward moving current at the equator due to the trade winds. In the north, this current would have mostly deflected downward, with some of it straying into this northern inland ocean area. The downward flowing waters would begin warming back up, eventually joining the equatorial current, completing the northern ocean gyre. In the south, the current would have to travel a bit further until it came into contact with this shoulder of land. Here, the waters would divert around as well, with some of them traveling back up north, again warming in the process. And then some of the water would also divert to the south and travel as cold water across the southern end of Pangaea until joining with the currents here and keeping on eastward, completing the southern ocean gyre. And there you have it, a basic illustration of what the ocean currents that interacted with the lands could have looked like. Lastly, and I'm not going to really explain why, there would have been a yearly equatorial monsoon season, blowing great amounts of rain from the Panthalassa into the Tethys, inundating many of the lands surrounding the Tethys Ocean with great amounts of water. Knowing these simple characteristics about the Earth and its ocean at this time, we're almost ready to start figuring out the land cover. But before we do that, we need to know how different the conditions of the Earth would have been compared to what they are now. Firstly, 200 million years ago, average carbon dioxide levels would have been around 1,850 parts per million in the atmosphere, compared to 400 parts per million we're hovering at today, meaning the CO2 concentrations around this time would have been about 5 times greater than what it is today, and 6 times greater than what it was before the Industrial Revolution. This would have resulted in global temperatures averaging roughly 3 degrees Celsius warmer than modern times. And while this might not sound like a lot, fossils from the North Pole 200 million years ago show subtropical and even some tropical plants growing here. And there's absolutely no evidence of glaciers or really any ice existing on Earth at this time, besides maybe within the mountain ranges. In other words, this would have been a greenhouse Earth, where even the North Pole could have been covered in tropical rainforests if the moisture levels were right. Because only warm climate environments could have existed at this time, this rules out the existence of any large temperate environments. So if temperature was less of a deciding factor at the time, this would have made moisture the primary determining factor for the environment. Because of this, the lands of Pangaea would have been balanced between basically two radically different environments. Where it was wet, there would have been forests, and where it was dry, there would have been hot deserts. And of course, where it rained a moderate amount, a narrow tropical savanna would have appeared as a transition zone between the two extremes. Using the ocean currents and mountains then, we can start to figure out where there might have been forests and desert and then fill in the lands between them with savanna. To start, I'm first going to look at the ocean currents. Cold water evaporates very little, producing very low levels of moisture in the atmosphere, which in turn produces only small amounts of rain. So beside lands with cold currents running along them, I'm going to put deserts. Inversely, where the surface waters are warm, evaporation occurs more readily, filling the air with moisture which eventually falls back to the surrounding earth as rain. So wherever warm waters flow beside the land, I'm going to make into forest. These trends still clearly exist to this day, by the way, like off the coast of California where cold ocean water moves, turning the land here pretty arid and creating environments like the Mojave Desert. While on the other side of the US, warm Atlantic waters flow up from the Caribbean, resulting in a much more humid eastern United States. This is also true for South America, Africa, and Australia. However, I mentioned earlier that the further into the interior you go, the likely the drier it would become. So I'm also going to push the deserts further into the interiors where they already exist. On the opposite end of this, as I mentioned before as well, a seasonal monsoon would have come into these lands, sending moisture further inland, likely pushing the forests at the equator deeper into the continent.
I want y'all to remember that. Look at the map now and realize how green Africa is according to the other locations. That's important when we start talking about the cradle of life, the abundance of resources. So there's no need to not share or give. And that was for like centuries. Even to today, Africa can feed the entire world with that greenery. They said it's still the same thing, you know. But we want to again look at it's the center of all things. It's green. It's plentiful. Wow, with food, minerals, and raw resources. Keep watching. It's almost over.
The forest would likely extend all the way to the central Pangaean mountains, but no further, making one side of the mountain range extremely wet and rainy, while the other side dry and desert. Again, we see this today in places like India, where moisture is brought all the way up until the Himalayas, and the lands on the other side, like Tibet, are extremely arid. This is called the rain shadow effect. So the equatorial forest would likely not have crossed over the central Pangaean mountains. This also would have prevented forests from moving too far into western Pangaea. Lastly, I'm going to place narrow savanna regions around the edges of the land, as the ocean usually acts as a moderating force for temperature and humidity. So in the end, we get a map that looks like this. And using this, I can use satellite maps to add a little texture, and that's about as good of a map as I can create without any more information. And the only better method I can come up with is to collect all the plant fossils dating back to around this time, determine what type of environment these plants would have grown in, and use them to reconstruct the landscape of Pangaea. But something like that is a job for more than just one person, and would actually require pretty substantial collaboration. So that's where I'm going to need to stop.
He stops right there. Wait. Let me go back.
20th century, the German scientist Alf
It restarted over. I didn't want it to restart over. Now, one of the things that I want you to focus on is realizing that they said that the under the earth, they call it, because there are a couple of theories. The tectonic plates are shifting and moving, and it took millions and millions of years to move the land separate for it to grow far apart. Millions and millions and millions of years. Nobody was there. So there, I don't care what anybody say, that they're, according to the fossils and everything that they're finding, it is still speculatory, right? Because there was a another reading I was a part of where they were studying the universe, and in the studying of the universe, they said that the universe is expanding. And so what they did was, in terms of being able, and it was somebody searching for the creator or the beginning of the universe, and they said as time goes on, you can see they're measure able to measure the distance between galaxies, right? So they're measuring the distance between stars and galaxies, and they're noticing that it is increasing, right? Adrian, hey, checking in. Hopefully everything is going well. And I can only see on one page, so all the other people that's on the other page, one love. I saw Imani. Yep, she checked in. Thank you, sister. I'm doing what I could do, sister. I'm doing what I could do. I told you I'm gonna do what I could do. And so as they were studying the universe and said the universe is expanding, what they did was they took a machine and contracted all the stars because they can see the path, all right, the trajectory of the universes and the galaxies spreading, and they pulled it back together. And as they pulled it back together, the stars came out of one location. So it was like the galaxy just said and opened up, and it was like that understanding, let there be light. All source of life and light came out of one source of light and light that they cannot find. Ain't that something? One location. Now, with the concept of Pangea, some say, yes, it's the tectonic plates moving the earth. And there is a theory that the earth is increasing. I don't know. If the universe can grow, why not the increasing planet? That's a theory. That's a thought. Something to think about. So now, and if you look, wow, look at all the greenery. Remember when they said it was all green? And you see it behind me, where the middle and central Africa, because that's what they said, life came out of the Congo. Woo! Life came out of the Congo in the middle of Africa. And we'll talk about why this is important to know, because when you're dealing with this and you're trying to, we're trying to decolonize our thinking. Decolonize. We got to understand it's not just a word that you are special to God, it's an understanding according to the development of the world that we are special to God. So African history and African spirituality, you got to put them together. You got to put them together, because in that space you start to decolonize the mind. You start to take out of what they didn't know. Oh, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that. But well, okay, I'll make the statement now. What they didn't know when they were putting this information together was the fact that they were reconstructing African history after they destroyed the continent, after they took over and made us second class citizens across the world to everybody else. Ain't that something? They started studying the world in which they lived in, which we had already done. But there was only certain amount of information that we would share with them. So when we would give them certain information, it says 360 degrees of information, meaning you get a full circle of who you are, right? And so now, well, we can't give it to you because spiritually you can't retain this information. So what they did when they conquered the continent was they took what they could, information that they could understand, and destroyed what they couldn't. And with that, we got modern civilization. So imagine what we would have did with it if in the sight of God, in the sight of having African spirituality come first. Imagine the things that we would have accomplished with. So now, if you can imagine, and this is why the Black Panther was so big, because it was like, wait a minute, if we had access to our own resources, everything raw because now they dissected the continent, and all the resources on the continent is used and sucked out by European countries. And Africa is not allowed to financially benefit socially benefit, emotionally benefit, spiritually benefit, physically benefit from its own resources. Ain't that something? That's what keeps it the way it is. And so there's a fight to reclaim itself. Ghana, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, um, Nigeria, everybody's coming together saying, yo, we need to shake off colonialism and own our own resources and rebuild a Pan African community globally. They're not looking at creating global power without the relationship that they share with the lost ones, which is us. We are the lost ones. And so, again, history is to give you a great sense of self, right? So now, of course, they talk about the human evolution. Now, as we go into human evolution, they're going to sit down and say, you talk about, and I want to get this so that you understand. Evolution, it talks the evolving from something else. This is the myth and the fact. We got to discuss this again. Man, tons and tons of data. If I can find it inside the, again, because I'll be reading stuff and then close it, read stuff and close it, read stuff and close it inside the People's Library. And the People's Library, this is all the sources, information I'm pulling is from, again, 6 terabytes of African history shared by our community, and it's called the People's Library. And if you seek to have this information, my email is info@woaatl.org. Hit me up, inbox me. We'll work it out. Get your hard drive, bring it here, let me get it to you. I'll switch the data over and give it back. Why? Because some information deserves to be free. Now let's move on to the human evolution. As you watch the human evolution and you watch the how this information is going to be displayed, know that there is a competing understanding, two competing understandings, that some people say we evolved from apes. I don't believe that, because there has been findings that all levels, there are 9 human forms, 9 human beings, nine beings of human form, right? Homo sapien, Homo erectus, Homo, all of this. And I'm gonna see if I can pull up a picture of how, what they said they look like, which was some animals. But then if you see the modern pictures that they showing, modern pictures, like every layer, most of the layers of them all look like man. All look like man. Ain't that something? And I said, wait a minute. The last time I saw that picture, he had fur on his face. But they're changing it because they're writing that down. Why? Because they don't want you to believe that we were the first people. They don't want that. So they say, oh, we came from apes. Yeah, really? So where'd you come from? No, that's not true. There have been agricultural, archaeological findings where they all 9 existed in proximity to each other. So not one developed off another. It was like they all existed. Ain't that something? And only one lived. Ain't that something? And that's Homo sapien. And that was us. Take a look at what they say. They're not denying we all didn't come out of Africa, though. So why you deny it? Now, they said you have the evolution of man in the center of Africa. And if you remember the dots, how they populated, they all existed around the same time. All right. And they said we evolved from one being to another. Now, I'm not saying that evolution is impossible. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't necessarily believe that theory because 3.75 million years ago, you wasn't there. You're finding fossils. Okay, I see the fossils. But we also know that they all existed at the same point in time. And so if you all exist at the same point in time, how does one come from the other? Is that possible? I don't know. But we know one thing. Man came from the continent of Africa. We also know that the continent of Africa was hot. And we said, we didn't say, but it is written that there is no way a people could have come out of the continent without a protection shield from the sun, which is Mendelin. Yeah, white folks couldn't have come first. They couldn't even been there at all 3.75 million years ago. Why? Because they would have caught cancer. They have no protection from the sun. There's no sunscreen. Right. Think about it, people. Now, if we are the first people on the planet, the first people of the earth, why are we not embracing who we are culturally? That's another question. Who we are culturally as a people. They said that as the changes happened to the earth, you had the Homo sapien explore out over 200,000 years ago out of Africa, migrated. Now, we also talked about Pangea being connected. A lot of times, and I didn't understand it at first, and it took me, some reading, that there are fossils from Africa inside Antarctica. Yes. I was like, how did that happen? Concept of Pangea. Easy, because it could only happen. Only tropical How can you find a tropical fossil inside a ice barren land? Pangea. Right. Life. It all formed. So, another conversation. Migration. Have they been able to track the actual time of migration? They're coming close to what's going on. Was Pangea already connected, still connected when the migration started? Believe so. Again, I'm not the expert, I'm the seeker, so I'm reading just as well as I'm teaching. All right, we'll get Walamo and Dwelly. I mean, God bless you, thank you. He's thinking about me. We'll get Walamo Latunji up here and have him have the conversation. If you are an expert and would like to share some information, come on through. I'll be setting up the I'll be setting up the Zoom classes so that when you see this and you see behind me, there'll be a classroom and I'll be able to talk and we'll be able to watch the same videos, have the discussion. Yes, if you seek to be a part of that, I'm gonna be sending out emails to my entire community to be a part of that, and that's all three regions. Yes, that's coming by Monday. You should check your email. If I have you on my email blast list, you should get it. So we'll be asking these conversations out to the greater community. But that is something that is it deeply important. Now let's talk about it. How did we populate the earth? Human migration. Here we go. This one don't have any talking like the other one, so it's a lot of reading. Look at where it's coming from. They're saying the first migration is out of Africa. That's the originating point. Now, if Pangea is still connected, because they're only showing you this after the tectonic plates have shifted or the earth have expanded. They're not doing it during where the lands were in sync, because it's going to let you believe, okay, so when we were in the boats, because that's ships right there. White folks didn't exist until what, about 20,000 years ago, right? Their DNA doesn't go back that far. Ours go back to beyond 200,000 years. Ain't that something? The mitochondrial Eve gene. We'll be talking about that as that comes up. Look at that. Ice Age. The last of it. And we were running, finding. Some of us went and walked into the Ice Age, and some of us was like, okay, I got stuck here, so I'm gonna go extinct, which is the Neanderthal was the last one to go extinct. All the other ones were extinct, and Homo sapien lived 12,000 years ago. The agricultural revolution. So what was in Africa then? Look at that. Today, we're all over the place. Why is this all important? People says, what this got to do with me today? One, the matter of importance to understanding Pangea, the human development, I don't want to say evolution, and the migration of the human is the fact that Africa then and Africa now is at the center of the world. Then and now. All life came from the continent and separated. Life started in Africa and migrated out. For whatever reason they chose to travel, they traveled. They wanted to see, explore. And that's just like any curious mind. I just want to explore the world. And so you start roaming and roaming and roaming and roaming. The source of all world resources, the ability to feed everybody, is out of Africa. Even now, because Africans speak, no, on the Afro Stream, and Afro Stream is what? Thursday nights? And we'll talk about it. The agricultural revolution coming up in Africa. Africa has the ability to feed the entire nation, and they will be working on it. I gotta send y'all that information. That's coming. And then the fact that melanin is that protective agent that God placed in us. Why? Look at where we started. It couldn't come backwards. We can't be cursed. How you gonna be cursed to be the first people? Let's decolonize our minds. And then again, this information helps us reconstruct African history. And being able to reconstruct African history is important because again, we're looking for a stronger self image, self realization, self awareness that helps us decolonize our minds and allows us to interact and navigate through a world now that is based off of operant conditioning and systemic racism. And we're not trying to stay here because when you learn how to operate and you're raising your kids according to the world in which we live in, not to disappear, but learning how to, what's the new word now? They call it coding. Learning how to code. But then you also got to teach them the fact that the reason why I'm teaching you how to pull these resources, these jobs, this money, this internet, this source, this information, for the sake of building a global Pan African community. It is helping us to reconnect this fragmented lineage where we have no beginnings. Because in this country, I say we're not African Americans, we're American Africans because we're more American than African. And right now, I'm moving my American African. I'm moving my African in the front. We take it for granted and call ourselves African Americans, but we don't live from an African perspective, where we happen to be in the Americas as a diasporic location. No, we're American Africans. Now, yeah, let's truly seek to change the definition by lifestyle and be African Americans. Reconnect the fragmented lineage and keep it connected to us. Once again, all of this data and information, wait, let me get it up, comes from the People's Library. Oh, that's an image of one of the early. Look, see how it looks now. It doesn't look like an ape now, does it? And so there's tons of pictures. Oh, let me here, tons of images here. See if I can get that one to come up. Yeah, see the early humans forms doesn't look like a good. See, they're changing now because now old back in the day, yeah, they gonna put hair all over his body. I don't see that now, and that's a mid level of homo. I can't even pronounce that word. Let's see here, and what else they have. I think they might have this one up. Boom! Look at how real it looks. Right. Hey, wait. My nose. We might be related. I'm just joking. Again, understanding who we are, understanding our hue, the different colors of our tones, right? This is the People's Library. It's a lot of data. It's a lot of information here. It's a lot of images, a lot to read, tons and tons of video. Let's see, early man. I could go on and on. Again, this is like a again, it's a lifetime, 30, 35 years, 30 years of collecting images and information, and scanning reports and book excerpts, you know, college documents of written paper. This is deep. And so I'm using this. I got the curriculum. He gave me the curriculum. And so I use it to teach the class. This is the folder called The Evolution of Man. We go back in his use of man, migration maps, how we migrated across the country. You saw what he had, and you see what he has. So what's on the internet is in here. What's in here is on the internet. And you can find it multiple areas. Take a look. Migration map. So it's a great source of information when you're dealing with kids, Afrocentric children in class, utilizing information. So you're not pulling Europeanized data. You can get data that is as close to truth as we can possibly get. So to help our kids understand the process, and then of course it's a with a resource of information, man. Please, you can do a report on this real easy. So we shouldn't. World history should not be hard for us here. Let's see what this one looks like. There you go. Look at that migration map out of Africa, and we covered the entire world. Out of Africa, and we covered the entire world. So did we transform? We'll talk about how we get to a point where we lost our melanin. This is how you get white folks, Chinese folks, the youth of African people. That's going to be in this as we move forward. But we want you to get to this, and I want you to understand the data. And I'm going to share this. I did say, there was another aspect of the teachings that I was going to do. You know what? I'm feeling good, and so we're going to continue. We're going to see how far this goes. I am not the expert. I tell you that. I am not the expert. I am just a seeker, seeking information, seeking more knowledge, more wisdom, more understanding, so that I could obtain self realization, knowing who I am in God, know who I am for my people, and knowing and learning and being drawn to what I am called to do and be in the time in which I exist. Now, one of the things that the library doesn't have, and I'll call them and discuss it, it doesn't have the information that I would like for it to have when it comes to African spirituality. That's a different subject. Now, there's a lot of ways that, they wanted to make sure that there's no information out there for us to grab onto, that we wrote, that come from the continent, that explains African spirituality, because it makes it a lot easier to make that transition. Again, I want you to, my reason for doing this is because as I teach um, Alkebulan Inspirational Sundays, I realized that I said, wait a minute, not just teaching people the faith that we have in the Pan African Orthodox Christian Church, not teaching our kids, but they also need to know again the history that developed religion, but they also need to know the spirit that governed the people that created the history that makes us such a spiritual and religious people. That's that power of who we are. That culture comes from that motherland, and it's in our DNA. It's in our DNA. And I'll say it again, it's in our DNA. God placed information and wisdom where we can't lose it. It's built in us. That's why you have some kids who come and just some people are just tapped. Some people are just tapped, and it just comes out. Everything that God placed in us, or the Creator placed in us, is coming from, it's genetic. And that's a beautiful thing. So learning spirituality and learning history coincides. And I'm not finished talking. So I think I want to go into that African spirituality section. Let's see. Now, again, I am not the expert, but I am a seeker. And when I say a seeker, it means Malekio and my community. I'm always inquisitive. I approach things with an open mind and an open spirit, knowing that the more I learn, the more I understand, the more I don't know. And so I continue seeking, seeking, and seeking. Some people say, yeah, brother, you a teacher. Some people call me pastor. I know in many ways I'm ministerial. I was told I'm supposed to be a babalao, African priest. What I do know without a shadow of a doubt is that the proof is in the pudding. Meaning, anything that I'm seeking to learn and understand about me is going to be chocolate. It's going to be African. That's the flavor. That's the flavor of the wisdom that I seek to understand the world in which I live in. I come from a people with a great history and great spiritual power and awareness. We come from a people of great history and a great spiritual power and awareness. For me, I belong to a community called the Pan African Orthodox Christian Church. I gotta be careful for that the music, make sure it don't run out. And for me, it was a balance because half my family is Christian, half my family is Muslim, and so I wanted a balance when I sought to understand who I was, who I am as a person, and the reason why I love my faith is because it is the balance of both worlds. It is, well, we're going to say the three worlds. African spirituality is the root of everything we do. We say we claim Christianity as a titled faith because every religion, is ours. And we can reclaim anything as long as we dissect it with an African eye. All of it. And, people argue, oh, Christianity. Yeah, well, there's 4,200 tribes in Africa, and there's 4,200 religions in Africa. We can choose any one we want to. Islam and Christianity are the infants of African spirituality. They came last, and so in this conversation, we'll see the similarities in how Christianity holds African spirituality deep in it, but because of our colonization, we don't see it. We don't connect to it. Why? Because they want to keep us from the power of who we are. And so again, for us as Africans, spirituality is now. Wait. Let me share this with you before we move, cause we moving. And so I won't be. I know when I first joined the church, there was a book that we were asked to read, right? And it wasn't. They didn't make it mandatory, but if you, because it was so much study that we had to do, they made this. They gave you this book, or they gave you the title of the book, and you had to go to the cultural bookstore. You save your coins and your pennies to go get this book. And this was the beginning. They said, look, we really want you to start taking it upon yourself, your spiritual journey. We're going to get you there with rituals and ceremonies and everything else, African history class, African black reality class, everything that we could possibly do to get you there. But we need you to also have ownership of it. And so, and you're going to hear the music again because I don't know how to turn it off just yet. This is the book, the first book of what we started, of what we had to learn from. And so I said, if I'm going to start dealing with the African spirituality, before we start, because I do have a professed dogma, meaning a sect spirituality out of West Africa. But we'll talk about that later. What I want to discuss is the basic foundation of African spirituality, the concepts, constructs, or philosophies of African religions and spirituality. And so, if y'all don't have this in your library, get it in your library. Also, and so I'll be selecting books, and we'll do this on a regular basis where there will be another book that we'll discuss. But this one is like, man, it's like foundation of to begin to understand African spirituality. So then, when you start looking at the different areas of African spirituality, or you're going into a particular sects of African spirituality, you have a clear understanding of what you're walking into, and you're not doing it blindly. And then, if you're looking at it, and then you can go like how you go to black churches and they got kente cloth on, but no sense of spirituality as terms of their culture. And then they take Christianity according to what the slave master gave them. How you not rewrite that? How you read it the same way? That means you're still colonized. And so we don't want to disrespect anybody's faith or anybody's beliefs, but we want to ask you to open up your mind, open up your spirit, and receive. In African culture, African spirituality permeates everything about life. Everything about life. There is no aspect of African spirituality that is not, again, you hear the music. There's no aspect of African spirituality that does not engulf all aspects. And that's why we have always been a deeply spiritual people. It is the strongest part of our tradition and our heritage. It encompasses every background, and it's our belief system, our ceremonies, our rites. Even it has babalaos, officials that lead sacred rituals. Very few writings. Very few writings. Even when you're dealing with Igbo or Yoruba, um, there's no sacred scriptures because it was a way of life, and so necessarily wasn't completely documented. But as a people, we were able to grow from it, develop it, and get there. Now, what happens at one point in time, Europeans became interested into understanding African spirituality. And I remember growing up watching movies. And again, know that I'm not the expert, I'm just a seeker. And I remember growing up watching movies where you would see Europeans in the jungle sitting amongst the bush and talking to the tribal leaders, community people, taking notes and then traveling back to Europe or Germany or wherever they were coming from, Britain, you know, uh, and explaining what we believe. The hard part about that, or the negative part about that, is when you look at most of these writings, none of them are sympathetic to understanding the sacredness. Very few of them, let's say that, let's say none, because there's no absolute. Very few of them wrote any books that was sympathetic to the sacredness of African life and African spirituality. So a lot of times when you look at African spirituality, the majority of us are chopping down everything. And so with that, and it's the same in reverse, where you have these conscious minded individuals who chop down Islam. They chop down Christianity just to claim the effectiveness of African spirituality slash religion. Well, when I say spirituality and religion, I'm gonna use it simultaneous. Organized religion is something different, right? But then there's is that we want to make sure that we understand it. So then the question was which one do you hold on to? Do you hold on to the colonized wisdom of Europe or the ancient wisdom of Africa? And so in the modern world, what would you do? What the Pan African Orthodox Christian Church did says we need to take the ancient wisdom of Africa and create liberation theology. What? That allows us to use our spirituality not only for self realization, but for also coming together for the sake of the liberation of black people. You see that? Yeah, red, black, and green. Yep. And it's this way. Right there. Oh, right there. Yeah. And so you know when you're walking into the atmosphere of the creator when because you don't want it to be lopsided. A lot of times you walk into these culturally charged communities that have no program to liberate black people. That's the problem. And so you got to look for something with program. And for me, I feel I found it. But I'm not here to push my beliefs on anybody. However, just to share to other offering Malachios, right? So what do we choose to believe? Now we at one point we had during the African Speaks Tuesday night at 7, we had a conversation versus ancestral veneration where they oh you can't worship your ancestors. And so again you have competing wisdoms. Ancient wisdom, let me get my hand in ancient wisdom versus this new age wisdom, this new birth, Europeanized wisdom that converted our belief for the sake of control. That you don't want. So you got to be able to look at it. So we even with ancestral venerations, we don't worship. No, we don't worship our ancestors. Not in African spirituality. In African spirituality, there's no such thing as ancestral worship. It's ancestral respect, and that's important. You know, libations, offering of foods is nothing but a token of fellowship, hospitality, and respect. Period. And so it's funny how in that notion where you go to a grave site and there's a picture, ancestral veneration. Somebody tragically passes away and you have a shrine for them for memory out of respect to who they are, ancestral veneration. When you're sitting there and you have the headstone and there and you're standing there and you go visit your mom's burial ground or grandma's burial ground, ancestral veneration. An area in your house where you have pictures up just to remember all your ancestors, ancestral veneration. We don't realize that we are doing we're living African spirituality naturally. The whole world has embodied African spirituality, and why not embrace it? And that's the conversation. Well, again, I am not the expert. With you, I am the seeker. And so, sharing information because certain information needs to be free. Where is it at? Wait a minute, what happened to my. Oh man, something happened to my setup where it erased all of the next level class information. How did that get deleted out of my studio? This is not cool. Well, we're gonna have to talk our way through this because I had some more visuals and the visuals I can't show you. So we'll talk through this. Religious evolution comes in three levels. Animisium and something like that. Polytheism and monotheism. Ani is Animi, animisium. Animisium. That's countless spirits, and that's the low level, where everything has a soul and everything has a spirit. Then you have polytheism. Polytheism, where there's major spirits, and you can find, where you got Shango, Oshun, Osiris. And then you have monotheism, where there is only but one God. The evolution of spirituality. Now, in understanding that, when you're looking at African spirituality, you'll be able to see whatever. And then again, there's 42 tribes. And so there's 42 different versions of African spirituality on the continent of Africa. 42, not 42, 4,200 tribes. Sorry. 4,200 versions of spirituality. A lot of African spirituality is, or African religions, is either tribal or national. That's sect. And it engulfs the lifestyle of that people. So studying one people is not the same as studying the other. So what you try to find is commonalities across the continent and how they process or interact in their spiritual wisdoms. And so you have those. And one of the other things that comes inside African spirituality is the conversation of magic and religion. Magic and religion. They said, wait a minute. They said, oh, that's voodoo. Well, there's an African spiritual system called voodoo, and it does have magic, magical rituals. And a ritual is only the act of manifestation. A ritual is a ceremony or a process of manifestation, manifesting what you want to happen. And in African spirituality, magic belongs in religion. Religion is or the spirituality is the all powerful entity. But magic is in that form. Now people, that's satanic. Let me give it to you this way so you can understand it. Again, I'm a seeker. In the Christian faith, we say I am. Dot 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 dot. We call the creator the great I am. Dot 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 dot. That is called the Moses code. I am. Dot, dot. Because saying the words I am enters you into a spiritual realm, which is God. Monotheism. And being able to speak the I am is the manifestation of what you're about to say, where they say the power of life and death lies in the tongue. Wow. African spirituality. That ain't got nothing to do with Christianity. It's all African. Christianity is built on African spirituality. So if I sit down and say I am rich, and my faith in connecting with the creator says go at the things that you requested as though they already are. What? It's faith. And watch it manifest from your word. What? Now, in African spirituality, other than just speaking it, they have a ritual. They have a ritual of manifestation for almost everything. African spirituality. That's the difference. So if you sit down and you're learning how to manifest the things in life, I want that job. I want that job. I am. I am. And then you say whatever that job is. I am receiving. I am claiming. I am speaking. What else is that? You call it what? Manifestation? Africans call it magic. But there's ritual to theirs. They do more than just using words, they use actions. Have you ever wrote down something that you wanted to be destroyed, and a bad thing, and there's a ritual for that? We do it, and something that you want to release. I no longer want to be on drugs. Fold it up, burn it. Again, ritual to help your manifestation become possible. We have to be careful of what we call satanic. African spirituality You can use your spirituality for good or evil. That's your choice. You got Christians, you got Europeans who kill people in the name of God. You don't belong here. They call you cursed. That's using their sense of spirituality for evil. We don't. We're trying to grow from it. Now, there is a book entitled Muntu, 1958. Right? It was J something. I can't even find it because I'm looking at the notes, and I had it. It was supposed to pop up. Now, that particular book squeezes African spirituality in four categories. Four categories. And when you listen to the reader, if you get the book, now we're going to use more modern books at certain times, but again, we're using, let me switch back to it. And I need to, I don't know why my other stuff did not populate the way it was supposed to populate. And I'm upset with that. But we're using this particular book at this particular time. In that book, it created it broke down African spirituality in four categories. The Umtu, and I have a. How can I get this? Let me see if I can pull this up. Let me get this image. If I can get this up so y'all can see it, and I want y'all because watching there is something in the words, the way the way the word is written. Okay, it's something in the way the word is written. That's the word Umtu, which means in that category you have God, you have spirits, you have the departed, you have human beings, us, and then you have certain, you have animals, trees. Wait, not yeah, humans. No, animals is not in that one. So it's God, spirit, ancestors, humans, and certain trees constitute the force of intelligence. Anything that constitutes the force of intelligence is the umtu, right? And then that was the first section. The section category of African spiritualities is kintu, the force of life under which the umtu controls, right? Which is plants, animals, and minerals, right? So that's the second level. Now we have dominion over the plants, we have dominion over the animals, we have dominion over the minerals, right? God, ancestors, four categories, which is the force of life that holds intellect. Umtu. Kintu is the force of life that is controlled by Umtu. Then you have Hantu, it's just that third part. Hantu is, wait. Let me add that here too, so you can see the word because it's a. I want to show you how this works inside the word. Let me do this. Forgive me, I don't know what happened in pre-production. My phone is going crazy. All right, that is the second stage or second category of African spirituality, which means the force of life that's under the command of the Umtu, which are plants, animals, and minerals. Then you have the third category of African spirituality, which consists of time and space. Time and space. There is very few writings on African spirituality, but in this particular book, this is the the it breaks it down. And now the last or the fourth category that can help you explain African spirituality is Kuntu. The other one was Kintu, and then Mumtu was the first one. And this is the modality or the expression of something, which is the beauty of something, the laughter, it's how something is being expressed. Now I want y'all to look, notice that all words ended in NTU. All words ended in NTU. And so in African culture, when you see a particular words have spiritual meanings, all the words have spiritual meanings, and that's the difference. So even when you're dealing with the issue of the Bible, when you're dealing with the issue of the Bible, all Old Testament is African names. And when you look up those African names, they got spiritual meanings until you get down to John, Luke, you know. It's what is that? What happened? They assimilated. That's what happened. But NTU is the relationship force that ties all four levels together. It is the tying spirit. Now, in Christianity, that's called the Holy Spirit, right? That spirit that goes in everything is everywhere. Hmm. And so, but in Africa, it's called the Intu, NTU. It is present in all things holy. Now, when you read that particular book, which is Umtu, Muntu, that particular book, when he writes it as though he is studying something sacred. So when you're looking at your African history and you're looking at African books or people talking to you about African spirituality, knowing that we are the people that brought spirituality to the world, nobody else was studying spirituality or no other people. It all came from us. So at any given time which you're looking at it, I ask you to approach it with an open mind and an open spirit, which will give you a sense of discernment. Really. Use a discerning spirit to define what settles with. And you got to know when you're coming in contact with your colonized self. African history and African spirituality needs not to be studied separate, because you're studying a history of a people who believed who they are in God. They had a particular vision of who they are. So not knowing the spirit that drove the people to create great things does us a disservice. Again, I'm not the seeker. I'm not the expert. I'm just a seeker. I'm just the person who's learning. I may have read a little bit more than somebody else or study a little bit more than somebody else, but don't make me the expert. At least not yet. But I seek to surrender. And I'm asking you, as we study African history and African spirituality, and we discuss the issues of modern time and inside of AfriStream and the African Speaks, I ask you to come with a discerning heart, an open mind, open spirit. Because we are always practicing African spirituality without even knowing it. Again, some of us enjoyed Thanksgiving. No, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. We celebrate Ramza Moja, which is a harvest of first fruits. It's African. And we thank God for all that He's done. And in my gratitude, I sat down and said, I need to extend myself even more to my people. Let me teach them what I've been learning, what I've learned, what I've come to understand, what I enjoy, and maybe they can share it. So, if at any given time you've enjoyed it, yeah, like, comment, share, because some information needs to be free. And if you're watching to us on Facebook, YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell so you're always aware of what we're doing and what we're sharing. And with that being done and said. I promised the Creator, my ancestors, and my community that I would put this together. Man, y'all don't understand. I hook or crook. It will be more organized next time. It will be well defined next time. I will make sure that the presentation does not get deleted before I go live. I guess I restarted my computer before I hit save. But this is the class, and I'm going to keep it as real as possible. I'm a Jade African. Worldofakibland.org. That's the youth program. You need to hit me, info at worldofakibland.org, or inbox me. Don't forget about the People's Library. If you want it, hit me up and we'll talk about getting it to you. Other than that, I'm going to prepare my butt off for next Saturday. I'm going to try to be ready by 1, right? But I'll see you tomorrow at noon. Keep Land Inspirational Sunday. One love.